Okay, and what I want to do in this video is kind of finish off our quick introductory look at all of the factors of production. And the final one that we're going to look at now is enterprise. And I suppose the idea here is, like anything and like all the, pretty much every one of these videos that we've started with, we start with a definition. But before we do that, I suppose we might start with a pictorial definition. And what we've got here is the four factors of production. So we've got land here, we've got labor here is the farmer, it's his hard work, we've got capital. And enterprise, in a way, and it's not just this, because to reduce enterprise to just a simple idea is not at all what entrepreneurship is, but it is certainly part of it. Okay, so any kind of the production of any kind of good requires some combination of the four factors of production, and this is just a kind of a quick, just to give you an idea of what exactly we're talking about when we come to enterprise. But to give you a more complete idea, we should look at the definition. So what enterprise is the factor of production which combines the other three factors in order to produce goods and services. And kind of for the visual learner, so it's enterprise, a factor of production which combines the other three factors of production in order to produce goods and services. That's what enterprise is. Now, an important fact about entrepreneurs, well, maybe I shouldn't have said obvious, but should be present from the definition. And again, this is just the definition. There's no need to kind of overly worry about this. Is that the thing about enterprise is that it combines the other three factors in order to produce goods and services. So therefore, the idea is if enterprise did not exist, the other factors of production would lie idle. They would do nothing. Now, it is for that reason, or for this reason, that I tend to give enterprise, and it's only a matter of opinion, it's nothing to do with kind of economics, but I kind of give enterprise primacy amongst the factors of production. I think it's the most important one, because when factors of production do nothing, nothing is made in the economy. And look, I mean, these are, to use the words factors of production do nothing, I mean, that really wouldn't happen. I mean, even during the worst of depressions, which is what this is, and it's people lining up to get free soup because the unemployment rate was about 25% at the time. It was massive. But when nothing is made in the economy, we're in a recession, and in that case, a deep depression, and as such, nothing is produced, so nothing can be consumed, and as such, we are poor. So the reason that I would give enterprise primacy, or call it the most important factor of production, is because it is the one that organizes all of society's other factors of production. It's the one that combines them in varying ratios, degrees, in order to produce different types of output. And therefore, when we talk about consumption being wealth, enterprise is the one that produces all of the things for us to consume, not in and of itself, but combines the other three factors in order to produce the things that you and I consume. Now, some of the famous entrepreneurs, I mean, you can have millions of them. Like, so there was like Rockefeller in America, there was JP Morgan, there was the captain whose name has escaped me at the moment. There was all of these different people throughout the history of America, particularly because the government had created wonderful opportunities and incentives and institutions that fostered the idea of enterprise, and or at least allowed it to function as it would in a well-functioning market. So this individual here is a guy called Henry Ford. Now, he did, I suppose, a number of great things, I'm sure, in his life, but the two things that kind of stand out for me are, the first thing he did was produce the Model T Ford car. And that means that he tried the Model A, that wasn't working, Model B, Model C, Model D, all the way along until he got to the Model T, okay? So he kept on going. He had the entrepreneurial spirit of, if something didn't work, he didn't just quit. He kept on trying to make it better and succeeded. But the second thing that he did for me, which makes him stand out as one of the great entrepreneurs of all time, is he revolutionized the automobile industry. And how did he do that? Well, he created the production line. So up until this point, what had happened when companies were producing cars, you would have a group of about 6, typically men, with all the parts of the different parts of a car around them. And today they'd say, okay, today we're going to build the engine, tomorrow we're going to build the chassis, the next day we're going to put the wheels on, all this kind of stuff. And what Henry Ford did was he said, no, I will not move the men. I will keep all the workers in each position and move the car along at different stages. So what would happen is that each worker would specialize in performing one or two or three specific tasks at each section. And with that, that specialization, their ability to produce their particular task massively increased. And that happened for everybody along the production line. When their ability to produce, their efficiency essentially increased. Well, a few things happened. Obviously, more is produced, and as such, prices fall because scarcity is reduced, and therefore more people can afford to buy it, and as such, more is consumed. So, the old thing that we're saying, when more is produced, that means that more can be consumed. But another thing that I want you to kind of get in your mind is that when productivity, the amount that is produced per hour per worker, increases, well, that means that the average cost of production falls. And when the average cost of production falls, another way of looking at the same thing, that more production equals more consumption, when the average cost of production falls, that means that allows the entrepreneur to reduce the price. And that's what Henry Ford did. He transformed American transportation from essentially, as far as I can see, largely horse and carriage to motor vehicle. And that was absolutely incredible. Now, entrepreneurs are the people who generate wealth in the economy. And I make these statements in order to try to, I suppose, promote, thinking about whether or not they're true. Of course not. They're not the only ones that produce. All factors of production are the things that generate wealth in the economy. But the reason that entrepreneurs do it most likely is at least for profit. Now, I do say the main reason that entrepreneurs take these risks, and they are risks, they're financial risks, because if your business fails, you may have borrowed a lot of money, and as such you owe a lot of money, and if you declare bankruptcy, well, then it'll be very difficult for you to get another loan, most likely. But also there's self-esteem risks, there's personal risks, there's emotional risks, because depending on the country where you are and their attitude towards, I don't want to say failed attempts, because that is a bad way of looking at it, but their attitude towards unsuccessful business ventures. You could suffer a lot of shame. So there is a risk. I do think that the proper attitude to have is to say well done, and when are you trying again if somebody fails in a business venture, and what have you learned that will reduce the probability of failure in the future. But essentially what we are saying here is that there are massive risks, and not just financial, emotional risks, and a large part of the reason that people are willing to do this is for profit. I would, however, say if you look at somebody like Gary Vaynerchuk or Elon Musk, or even going a bit older school like Richard Branson, these guys have an innate drive for success, and I'm sure they may be willing to do it for less money. It is the intrinsic drive. But one thing I can promise you about enterprise or about a business, that unless you make a profit, you can't continue in business, because you're suffering a loss, and as such, the people that you are borrowing from to cover those losses will want their money at some stage, and therefore, unless you can generate a profit to pay off your debt or your creditors, the people to whom you owe money, your business cannot survive in the long run. I suppose then we just kind of have to quickly talk about what is an entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur, the first thing we've already talked about, is a risk taker. It is a person, a man or woman, that take a risk. Why? In order to make a profit. And what do? They combine the other three factors of production in order to produce goods and services. So again, this is the idea for the visual learner, to try and give you prompts for your mind. Okay, so that's what an entrepreneur is. And the main thing about enterprise, and again, don't forget, well, it's not the main thing at all, but don't forget that the reason, the name given to the financial reward that is earned by entrepreneurs, we call that profit. And don't forget, and I will say this, I think it's important for people, particularly young people, to understand this. We live in a society now, many of us, particularly in the West, that talk about, I'm not saying greed is good. I'm genuinely not saying that, but profit by no means is a dirty word. Profit is the reward that people get for organizing production, for producing goods and services that people want at a price that they are willing to pay. Profit is the reward that entrepreneurs get for serving their fellow man, because in the market, okay, and not serving their fellow man altruistically for just the love of their fellow man, but serving their fellow man by producing goods and services and selling them to goods and services that they want at a price they're willing to pay. Because you cannot force somebody to buy something in a market. You have to entice them to do it. Now, of course, hopefully we don't want entrepreneurs to be lying or making false claims, but even if they were to make false claims, there are plenty of different survey sites that people can go to check out what's the best dishwasher, what's the best computer, what's the best phone, what's the best television. And if you are making false claims about your products, people will review your products and say that they are terrible, and as such you will not be able to continue in the long run. So the most important thing I want you to understand about enterprise and about profit is that you can only earn profit if you serve your fellow man. And what enterprise does is he or she combines the other three factors of production to produce goods and services that people want at a price they're willing to pay, and as such, at least if they stay in business in the long run, are making people's lives better.